In this presentation, we'll be discussing using a variety of sources, including secondary and primary sources for data collection on your papers. Basically, the concept here is simply that there are two different kinds of sources that are available to you, primary and secondary sources. Um, or in this case, really, there's a couple different ways to talk about that. You can talk about primary sources in the sense of materials that are direct accounts of an event, or original source materials, and secondary is things that have been written about them. But in this case, we're talking about on the level of research itself. So we're talking about primary and secondary research. And primary research basically means that it's material or research that you do on your own. Basically, you actually go out there and conduct the research yourself. So in other words, you're the first person out there collecting this data and putting together this material. Secondary research is simply material that you find in newspapers, magazines, academic journals, anything that's been published and it's available in these outside sources. And it's usually a good, there's usually a lot of good secondary sources. Simply it refers to research that you have not conducted on your own. In other words, secondary research is research that someone else has already done the beginnings of the work for you. With secondary research, there is some advantages and there are some disadvantages. Advantages is it's inexpensive, it's easily accessible, it's immediately available in libraries and online. It'll provide you with some essential background and help to clarify and refine your research problem. Essentially, we often talk about seeing what's out there in the literature. That's what we're doing when we're looking at secondary research. May help you to find some good research method alternatives, and might point out some difficulties that you might encounter in your research process. Disadvantage, well, it could frequently become outdated. When you're using using sources, secondary research, you have to make sure that that source is current, because otherwise, you might find that it's a couple years old and that information is outdated. Potentially unreliable. You never really know where some of that material is coming from. You have to again be very careful in looking at it and seeing that it is in fact good information that comes from a credible source. So you have to make sure where it's coming from. Sometimes it won't be applicable to the problem at hand. It won't answer your questions. It won't have enough to do with what you're looking at. And sometimes there simply is a lack of available information on whatever area that you're looking at. There may be a lot of things on your broad topic, but on your specific area that you want to look at as far as that topic is concerned, there may not be any information. Primary research also has certain advantages. It's applicable and usable as long as you do it correctly. You're able to define exactly when you want to ask, so one would hope that it's accurate and reliable and can answer your direct research question. And since you're conducting it at the moment, it should be up to date. Disadvantages, it can cost more, and it can be, even if it doesn't cost more as far as money, in the sense that in this class it might not cost more as far as money is concerned, but it will cost more as far as time. It's not immediately available. It takes time to define your problem, come up with your research method, be it a survey or poll or whatever the tool is going to be. And then it's not always readily accessible. It takes time to put it together. There needs to be people that you can survey or poll or observe, or experiment, whatever you're going to do. You're going to need to have resources available in order for you to carry out the project, and that's not always the case. Well, some primary research methods and techniques include quantitative data collecting methods and qualitative data collecting methods. Quantitative data collecting methods involve generally collecting numbers. You generally get a result that comes out as some kind of statistic. So unsurprisingly, the big thing under that is surveys. There's lots of different kinds of surveys that you can do. You can do personal interviews where you've probably seen people in the mall with a clipboard and they're like, hey, can we ask you a few questions? Personal interview survey. And you can mail out a survey to a larger group, hope to get some responses back and collect data from that. And you could do in-house self-administered survey. Say, for example, when you're in a classroom setting, if you distribute it to everyone in the class, or like if in this online class, if you put up a survey on SurveyMonkey, had people go to that would technically be a telephone, fax, or web survey. But if you're sticking to just the people in this class, it could also be considered an in-house survey. Other quantitative data collecting methods could include experiments, mechanical observation, and simulations. Qualitative data collecting methods would be something like a focus group where you gather people together to discuss your topic, or in some cases, like if you were marketing a product, you often get together a focus group to discuss that sort of thing. Individual depth interviews, if you interview someone in more detail rather than just surveying them, if you actually give them a full interview, it's qualitative data. And human observation and case studies. Well, primary research can be experimental. Okay, you carry out some kind of experiment, or if you're, like, say, trying to market a product, you could do sort of a test marketing. It could be observational, whether this be by you actually going out and observing, or through some mechanical method where you set up a computer to maybe record something, your camera to record something and bring that back, or a computer to record how many people purchase a certain item at a store. Surveys can be a mail, telephone, face-to-face, whatever the case might be. And then focus groups. So focus groups are usually 8 to 12 people. They often have a moderator that try to reach some kind of agreement on opinions about the product. If you saw some of those Domino's commercials where they get a bunch of people together and have them talk about the pizza, that would technically be a focus group. One of the common things is personal interviews, which could also include focus groups. Certain advantages is you generally get a high response rate. There's flexibility because you're able to change up your questions. You don't have to stay. It's good to write out a question beforehand, but you don't have to stick to those. You can kind of change them as the situation merits. You can show or demonstrate items. Fuller explanations can be given. You get your data quickly, which is always a good thing. And you can also, pay attention to things like body language, which would give you a clearer understanding of what exactly is being discussed. So personal interview disadvantages. Well, it could be expensive, and at least it does take a lot of time. There is a possibility of either you as an interviewer or your interviewee having certain biases. Sometimes, you may be asking personal questions, and that's always kind of a risky matter to be doing, like asking people about their age or income or something like that. Respondents may not be very relaxed in that kind of situation, which can cause problems. And, time's not always convenient. You got to set up a time to actually go out and interview them via either face-to-face or even over the phone. You need to have time set up to do that. So it can be kind of tricky. You can send surveys in the mail. It's cheap. There's usually no interviewer bias because you've written the questions. There's potential for a little bias there, but not very much. All the people that you're surveying get the same questions, which is good. It's consistent. It's a large number of respondents that can be included. It's anonymous, and respondents can choose whatever time they want to fill out your survey. Disadvantage, well, sometimes a lot of the time people simply don't return the survey. So you have kind of low response rates. Sometimes they just think it's junk mail and they throw it away. It's also very impersonal. Sometimes that doesn't work very well with some people. Television surveys, Their telephone surveys are have certain advantages as well. They're more flexible compared to mail surveys. They're quicker. They will cost more depending on your phone company. You generally have high response rates. People are often, they can just answer a few questions over the phone, so that might work. They tend to be fairly short, because people don't want to talk on the phone forever. They are more obtrusive than the mail. In other words, it does interfere more in that person's life. Um, it's harder to build a rapport with the person than when a face-to-face interview, because you do not see things like body language, which makes it a little bit more difficult without those nonverbal. So as I said, it could be a little bit expensive. In-house surveys, advantages to those is they're completed on-site. They're very convenient. Sometimes they don't generate very high response rates though, so that can be a bit of an issue. Online surveys often work pretty well. Some advantages are they're relatively quick and flexible. People can go to the site and take the quiz whenever they want, or the survey. There's a big audience for online, so the audience is growing. It's relatively cheap. You can use graphics and visual aids. It does require some technical skills, both to develop and analyze the questionnaires. And, it may, in some ways, deter from your website traffic. Um, Secondary research information, easy to find in places like the library, books, journals, newspapers, CD-ROMs, all those sort of things. Online, databases like EBSCOhost or Academic Search Lead are great. There's periodicals, index, newsletters, demographics. And you can always, of course, use search engines. You can rely on publications by various trade associations. There's government data like the census. Lots of companies have published material out there. Like if you're doing research on a company, you can usually go out and find like their financial statement pretty easily online. So there's lots of secondary research tools that are